Okay, so everyone has, I've sent the translation of the verses for today that we are going to cover. Let us start with verse number 9 of the Ishavasya Upanishad. I will chant. Andham tamha pravishanti ye avidyamupasate tato bhueva te tamo yau vedyam rataha. So the verse translates to, into blinding darkness enter those who follow ignorance. But in greater darkness are those who devote themselves to knowledge alone. So let's take this up word by word. Andham is uh, into blinding. Tamha is darkness. Pravishanti comes from pravesh, enters. Ye those who avidya, which is ignorance. Upasate, upasana karna or worship or follow. Tataha, than that. Bhuya, if in greater. Te, those. Tamoya, in darkness. U, also. Vidyayam, in knowledge. Rataha. Rataha is when you revel or devote yourself or enjoy, right? So the verse translates to, into blinding darkness enter those who follow ignorance, but in greater darkness are those who devote themselves to knowledge alone. So let's read it together. Andham tamah pravishanti ye avidyamupasate tato bhuya ev te tamoya uvidyayam rataha. So today, the three verses that we are going to cover, they form a set and they describe the importance of knowledge and also actually avidya, and we will discuss that, and how knowledge actually helps us attain salvation or moksha. Moksha, you may recollect, we had discussed some sessions back, was one of the four goals that Veda prescribes for humans. This actually we had discussed during verse number 3, while doing verse number 3, which goes Asurya Namate Loka Andhene Tamsavrata. So there we had said that you should do the four goals were the dharma, arth, kam, and moksha, and 25 years of our lives were into each of these categories. So we were supposed to learn dharma in our student years, and over the next 20, so that was the first 25 years, and then over the next 25 years we were supposed to employ this dharma to attain wealth, earth, and provide ourselves kama or fulfill our desires. And the last 50 years, so this corresponded to the brahmacharya ashram, the grihastha ashram. And then we came to the vanpras and the sannyas, which is the last 50 years, 25, when we were supposed to focus on moksha. So how we had discussed then how these four goals are essential for humans to have a balanced and purposeful existence. So, dharma is our moral duty, earth is prosperity, calm is fulfillment of desires, and moksha was that ultimate liberation. This is the comprehensive framework that is advised by the Vedas. Now, of all these goals, moksha is the highest, and that is what we are talking about in today's set of verses. This particular verse is saying what? It's saying that those who follow ignorance, avidya. Avidya means are engrossed in the world and are unable to discriminate between the body and the soul. And so we are unable to actually understand the core, which is God within each one of us. So avidya leads to confusion between the gross and the subtle, and such people enter great ignorance marked by blinding darkness. Interestingly, the verse goes on to say that the ignorance or the delusion or the darkness of those who remain devoted to or are limited only to theoretical or bookish knowledge is far greater. Okay, so it's a very interesting verse, and we will discuss this in detail. Now, what is avidya or delusion or ignorance? So, the typical mistakes that we make when we are out in the world and we are living our lives, firstly, we mistake the transient or which is fleeting for the eternal. So our identification with this body, just giving examples here, there are many more examples which will fit into this category where we mistake the transient for eternal. So we take this body or this life as eternal, and you can, dissect it further. Like, so you take your youth as eternal. So even if we are in our 70s, we are trying to look as youthful as possible. Right. But we have to understand that all this is transient. The body itself is transient. Once we are born, we will die. So that is one mistake we make, that we mistake the transient for the eternal. Next is we mistake the impure for pure. Sure. So when we sit down for puja, what do we say? Okay, I've not had a bath as yet. Let me have a bath. Then I will do my puja. Great. It's a great thing. But when you sit in the puja after the bath, so physically you're clean. What about your mental thoughts? What about the uh, tainted emotions that you might be having and you're worshipping God? We need to have purity at that level also. So that is another mistake that we make. Then it is one biggest mistake we make is we treat the inanimate as animate, or we mistake the inanimate for animate. And this specifically happens with our body. So, we think that our eyes see, ears hear, nose smells, so on and so forth for all our organs of perception. But the eyes by themselves is just an instrument. It has to be enabled for the stimuli to reach our mind and our intellect and it to make sense to us. There is something much more than just the physical eye. Okay. Similarly, for the ears, sound travels inside, then it is registered by our brain into a set of thought processes. It makes, so when someone calls out my name, I hear that and it registers in my brain as my name and I respond accordingly. So it's a non trivial issue. But what we think is that this ear of mine is hearing. So we are mistaking this ear, which is inanimate per se, as animate. So, and interestingly, if those of you who are interested, Kain Upanishad answers only these questions, that how do my eyes see and how do my ears hear and so on and so forth. This is another mistake that we make. And the fourth and the biggest mistake that we make is that we understand or mistake sorrow for joy. We think that the mundane experiences that we are having in the world, so I take a ride in a Jaguar, or I go for a travel business class to US of A. It's a great bliss, but it is a transient joy. It is fleeting. It is limited, but we take it to be eternal. So, so we mistake that sorrow for joy. And all these mistakes that we make are actually born out of ignorance. So, essentially, what is happening is that avidya leads the Jivatma, we people, to limit ourselves to this body. So, we identify only with the body to the extent that we spend the entire lifetime catering to the cravings of the body and the mind. And all our activities or karma is performed to that extent. We tend to miss our connect to the Paramatman, to God, or that pure consciousness. So the Jivatma, that is individual souls, they completely miss the connection to that Paramatman. That means that we tend to identify only with the body. So this leads to what? This leads to I am the one principle. So I feel that I only exist and the entire world, entire creation is there to cater to my likes and whims and fancies. Everyone is there to serve me. And this is in complete contradiction to the oneness principle that we discussed and we just recapped in verses 6 and 7, right? So, avidya, this is the delusion. Avidya leads to multiplicity. And as we saw, what verse number 1 pointed, the first line of verse 1, Ishavasimidam sarvam yatkinch jagatyam jagat. So that unity or oneness is the eternal principle that we need to understand. So this is what avidya is. And in Bhagavad Gita, specifically chapters 2, 3, 4, and 5, they explain to us comprehensively and in detail why indiscriminate indulgences into the sense objects must be controlled, wisely controlled. So we should not be hypocrites. So if the mind is going towards a particular object, we must not sit in denial. We must manage, learn to handle ourselves. And then we had also discussed extensively how the contact of the sense organ with the sense object, the joy that comes out is derived from this contact, follows the law of diminishing return. And the standard example, and also the start of the summer season. So when you have the mango after one whole year, okay, these days you can have it all around the year, but sticking to the seasons. So when you have the first mango of the summer season, which you're having after one year, it is wow. It is like the amount of joy that you derive from eating the delicious fruit is, let's say, X. Okay. Now, so you've had the mango, it is over and done with. Mentally you keep indulging, so you are indulging in that experience that you had, and then you want to have another, the next mango of the season, right? Interestingly, the next mango of the season, which you may have after a day, maybe after 2 days, maybe in a week, will always give you pleasure which is less than X that you derived from the first mango of the season. And this will continually keep decreasing till the time, by the time you hit July, you say, oh my God, too many mangoes this season. I'm cloyed. Okay. So this is what happens. But what now happens is that we have actually become addicted to that contact. The contact is essential. So after dinner, you have to have a mango. But the amount of pleasure that we are deriving has reduced significantly. The mango example may be slightly less oppressive, if I may say. But if you think of smoking, drinking, wealth, power, it hits you more. You know, so whatever pleasure you were deriving by having one cigarette in a day, very soon it translates to 10 cigarettes in a day, then maybe 10 packs in a day, and you're not, now you've become addicted to it. You can't let go of it. So that joy has become sorrow, right? So this happens with most of the contacts that we make in the world, but yet we move into the world seeking these worldly contacts. Why is that so? The reason is, of course, avidya or delusion, ignorance of our infinite nature. My Each one of us is connected to that Paramatman, but we don't see it. And because we don't see it, we find a gap, we find a void. And to fulfill that void, that sense of gap, we move out into the world to fill that void. Instead of moving inwards, we move out into the world. So our thoughts start moving towards objects and beings. This is desire. And now, in order to fulfill that void, we focus on activities according to our vasanas or our thrust or what we like. So it's based on our nature. So some people want more wealth, some more power, some like to be just have more worries to discuss problems. Some people want a better physique. So howsoever we are centered, so is our action based, and we direct our efforts to achieve it. Now, these desires stem endlessly, and our goals for the external world is continue to stem out infinitely. But the joy that we are deriving from each of these contacts is finite and fleeting, and more effort has to be put in to derive the same amount of joy. This further consumes our body, mind, and intellect. And consequently, as the desires multiply, so does our stress and agitation. And Bhagavad Gita, you make a recollect, mentions that the pleasures from the sense contacts are wombs of sorrow and are fleeting. And the sukh or the happiness which arises from the sense organs, from the contact of our sense organs with the sense objects, is rajasic. That means it is pleasurable in the initial stages, but turns poisonous later on. The wise one, the jnani, the one who's has the vidya and who is well ahead on the spiritual journey, understands and works towards reaching that Paramatman, that self which is eternal, which is pure bliss, which is paripurn, whole, perfect, complete, and absolute. So the Jnani is truly God centered. So this is what brings us to tells us what is Vidya. Vidya is lack of ignorance that we just covered. And as I mentioned, line one of the verse one of this great Upanishad, where we understand and implement the oneness principle, where we see unity in diversity. And how do we inculcate that? Through the purification of body, mind, and intellect, through the practices of Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and Jnana Yoga, respectively. So we cleanse ourselves, we purify ourselves, but a lot of self effort and control is required. Yoga, we know, means uh, union with our essence, with our core, and not the these asanas and pranayam that we do. That's just very, very limited and gross aspect of yoga. Yoga means that in and through our body, mind, and soul, we think of uniting with that Paramatman. And we understand that that union with that Paramatman is the eternal and fundamental fact, understanding the reality the way it is, or seeing our connection, Jivatma's connection to that Paramatman or God, that pure consciousness. So this is Gyan or Vidya. Now, in the context of this verse, the verse is referring to people who have only theoretical knowledge. See, today there is an overkill of information that is available to us, and it has become knowledge has actually become synonymous with collecting data. And thanks to AI, we have stopped even using our whatever little faculties or our great brains we were doing. We have stopped using. We just put in the keywords and expect something in return from the app that is available. But we must understand that knowledge is different from information. Knowledge is firstly understanding of the information and then implementing it in our personality. So, in knowledge, in gaining knowledge, the entire personality is involved. And today's education has separated us from our true conduct. I mean, so earlier you may recollect, we used to have those moral science classes as part of a school curriculum. Okay. Maybe we were not quizzed or marked on that, but we did study good manners, good conduct, etc. So they went a long way into our character building. and they formed part of our education, and essentially that was the dharma. So learning a mathematical equation or the geography of the world or the history of India, it's fine, it's great, but there was no character building these days. I mean, it is only through these kind of sessions that we used to have that character building of our personality. So the verse is addressing those people who know the literal meaning of the spiritual text. They may be able to recite that I know Bhagavad Gita by heart and all the 700 verses I can recite. But it doesn't necessarily make us wise. We stop at that theoretical knowledge. It is only when we make that knowledge our own, when we start living that knowledge, and we become like the person mentioned in verses 6 and 7 who sees oneness, or we start experiencing that knowledge, then we have become wise. So the verse is addressing only those people who have the theoretical knowledge but do not experience it. So you talk about oneness, but the moment you step out of your car, you expect someone else to open the door for you, lay out the red carpet for you, and open the gate of the building for you. Why should someone else do it? Why can't you do it? I mean, unless you have a physical problem, it's why should someone else do it for you? So, those people who only possess theoretical knowledge or who revel in that and don't go beyond that, that means they do not make it a part of their personality, they suffer a worse fate because they have the knowledge, but they don't apply it or internalize it. So, the punishment for those who are aware of the truth but do not act accordingly is far greater than those who are ignorant of the truth. And here I would like to give some, bring out this fact through some examples, uh, theoretical knowledge versus practical knowledge. See, if you're trying to explain the color green to someone, to a child maybe, and you keep saying, okay, it is a mixture of, two primary colors, blue and yellow, so that gives you the color green. You can go on and on. But if you just simply show a leaf, and say, this is the color green, immediately it makes sense. The understanding of the person is complete. Now, in our school curriculum, we did all these formulae for areas of rectangles and trapeziums and triangles and circles. That knowledge remained limited to attempting those mathematical problems which we were supposed to do as part of our school curriculum. So the area of the rectangle was length into breadth, area of a circle was pi r squared, where r was the radius, triangle was half base into height. So this we knew. I mean, we still know, but the scope, it was limited to that subject, to that mathematical class. Maybe some things were used in the physics class as well. But if we pursued our career as an architect or maybe as a civil engineer, and then to manage a particular layout or a building, when we start calculating the areas of the floor and the walls, suddenly that whole knowledge that we had just picked up, because we were supposed to pick it up, right? It started making sense, and we started applying that knowledge for costing of material and resource estimation. Another example, we all know that, or we have read uh, and got it hammered into us that both light and sound are waveforms, and light travels faster than sound. Okay, fine. So that we mug up and kind of move on. But when you see a flash of lightning and you hear the rumble of the thunder after a few seconds, that concept of light traveling faster than sound immediately settles in, right? So this is how the theoretical knowledge is different from the practical knowledge. And again, coming back to our favorite example, that the wave on the ocean is nothing but the ocean. It is there for a transient, fleeting moment, when it seems to have a personality of its own, but it falls back into the ocean and merges with the ocean. So it becomes one with that ocean again. once we see that happening with all of us, and we all going back into that Paramatman or that pure consciousness, we understand this. The theoretical knowledge becomes practical knowledge, or when we start seeing the Jivatma's connection to the Paramatma, that is pure consciousness. So can I move on to verse number 10, or would you have any questions?
Yeah, Deepaji have explained so well, so nicely. I mean, any layman can understand it so well. Um, well, I'm really enjoying this session.
Okay, good, good. Okay, so let me move on to, today we have a lot of ground to cover actually. So I'll move on to verse number 10. अन्यदेवाहुर्वेदयान् दाहुर्वेदया इति शुश्रूं धीराणां येनस्तद्विचक्षिरे. So the verse translates to, other, it is said, is that which comes by knowledge. Other, that which comes by ignorance. That is what we have received from the wise who revealed that to our understanding. That meaning Paramatman. So let's take this up word by word. Anyatev, another. Result is implied. Ahu is said to is said, translates to is said. Vidya, by following knowledge. Anyat, another. Ahu is said. Avidya, by following ignorance. Iti, thus. Shushrum, what we have heard. Dhiranam. Dhir means one who is steady. So it refers to the wise people of yore, the sages. Ye who, nah is us, tat, that uh, God, which Chakshire explained after contemplation, right? They tried to explain to us. So the verse translates to, other it is said, is that which comes by knowledge. Other, that which comes by ignorance. This is what we have received from the wise who revealed God to our understanding. So let's read it together. Anya devahur vidya, anya dahur vidyaya, iti shushurum dhiraram, ye nastad vich chakshre. So the wise masters, our spiritual gurus, masters, scriptures have told us that true knowledge and wrong understanding, or vidya and avidya, each has different results. And interestingly, both have a role to play in our attainment of God. Now, what we have to understand is that scriptures and gurus can only point to that knowledge. That knowledge is beyond our capability. So it cannot be, that infinity cannot be comprehended by finiteness. So the teachers, whoever is explaining to us, can only point to Paramatman. How we internalize it is solely our onus. And again, I will try to explain this through some examples that we uh, follow. So, when we're trying to locate the pole star, or which is the North Star or the Polaris or Dhruv Tara as we call, we use the on a clear night, right? How do we locate it? The pole star is actually it's part of the constellation Urza Minor, or the Little Bear. Now the stars of that constellation are very faint. So we use the brighter constellation, which is Urza Major. So we use that constellation, right? Four stars, and then it has a tail, to locate the Polaris. So we first locate the brighter constellation, which is the Ursa Major in the sky. And then we use the two stars at the end of this constellation, and then we point them to the North Star, the other brighter star, which is part of a more feeble constellation, right? So this is how we do it. Then another example is locating the morning star. And uh, which is actually called Arundhati. That is the morning star. Again, it is visible for a very short time, and it is very faint. So Arundhati star is actually shown in steps. Again, following that same principle of moving from the brighter stars to the fainter stars. So this maxim, this principle of moving from what is clearly visible or brightly visible to us to go towards unknown is what the our gurus also employ, right? So this location of Arundhati Nyaya, it's become a process actually which has been laid down in our scriptures. What is the process? That we first go down to the level of the person with whom we are dealing or guiding, and we start at that level, right? And we take them one step at a time to make sure that they understand each step, and then we lead them to the final point. Okay, that is the North Star, and that is when they see it and they feel very good, right? Aha moment. That is the aha moment. Another example is, see, suppose a foreigner is visiting and you say, he or she asks you, where are you staying? You say, I stay in Noida. So the person may not have heard of Noida. So we start applying that Arundhati Nyaya principle technique. And we say, what, have you heard of Delhi? They say, yeah, yeah, it's the capital of India. So you stay there. So no, 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 I don't stay there. I stay 20 kilometers towards the east, beyond the Yamuna, on the towards the east of that. So again, if you see, we are using these principles so often in our day-to-day interaction with the world. So similarly, the gurus and the scriptures put out these karma yoga, bhakti yoga, and jnana yoga to purify us at the physical, mental, and intellectual levels, so that we are able to cross over from the terrestrial realm that we can identify with to that transcendental, which is incomprehensible, from mortality to immortality, from reality to from non reality to reality. I'll extend, Preeti, the meeting. Huh? I'm extending.
Okay.
So that is what it is. But the final step is meditation, where one's inner self is absorbed in Brahman, and that is only our onus. Only we can do it. However, both knowledge and ignorance, or avidya and vidya, gyan and karma. See, avidya is leading us to gyan, okay, karma, sorry. So, gyan and karma are required in our goal of attainment of moksha. So, both paths have to be used, and how these have to be used is explained in verse number 11. So, I will chant verse number 11. वेद्यां च अवेद्यां च यस्तद्वेदोभयं सः अवेदया मृत्युं तीतर्वा वेद्यामृतमश्नुते. So the verse translates to, one who knows both knowledge and ignorance transcends death through ignorance and attains moksha through knowledge. It's a beautiful verse, and you will appreciate its significance as we when we discuss. Just moving on to the translation. Vidyayam is through knowledge, cha and avidyaya through ignorance, yaha that tat that Paramatman, Ved is able to understand. Abhayam, both these, Saha is together, avidyaya through ignorance, Mrityum, death, Titharva, crosses over, transcends, Vidyayam through knowledge, Amritam, so it is nectar, elixir, ambrosia. Here it means salvation, moksha, mashnate, attains, obtains, enjoys. So one who knows both knowledge and ignorance transcends death through ignorance and attains moksha through knowledge. So let's read it together. Vidyam cha avidyam cha yastad vedobhayam saha avidyaya mrityum titarva vidyaya mrit mashnute. So now let's go back. See, we in verse 3, that Asurya Namte Loka, we talked about the possibility of the cycle of birth and death continuing endlessly, right? And there, of course, we are talking when you do anything which uh, harms your own conscience, you will be born into worlds of great tamas. So that was verse number 3. Verse number 2 was what? Kurvanne vehe karmani, if you may recollect. It's a short Upanishad, so it helps to, you can settle with the verses very soon. So kurvanne vehe karmani jiji vicheshatam sama. So that verse was actually talking about the exit from this cycle of birth and death. How? By doing the righteous action, remembering that Paramatman, by acting in the world and doing dharmic activities so that they don't taint us. Or what we said in that verse was, by remember and take support of that God, one should act selflessly in the world with nothing to gain nor lose from one's actions. So one works from free from ego and egocentric desires. So now what happens then? One's actions do not produce new vasanas, and one is able to sublimate whatever one's vasanas we have. So it said that there is no other way, that the actions do not taint such a person. There is no other way by which actions do not taint. That is what the verse number 2 had said. So, such a person's actions do not taint a person or stick to the person or add to our Vasana baggage. Now, I thought we will spend some time to understand what is happening here. It's very easy to say. And of course, we discussed all this in Bhagavad Gita in great detail. It's a much more elaborate text. But some important things we need to recap here to be able to understand this verse. See, what is our composition? We consist of a gross physical body, subtle body, which is a mind and intellect, so emotions and thoughts. Then we have the causal body, which is our seed personality, vasanas, our inherent nature. So, right, someone is a more physical person, someone is out into sports, someone is more power hungry. So, that is our nature. Someone is an artist. So, these are the three layers. And the fourth layer is Om, that pure consciousness which we are talking about, that Paramatman, the enlivener. So the gross body is housing what? Our five senses or gateways, the Gyanindriyas, the five organs of action or Karbindriya. It is housing the subtle, so the mind and intellect, and the Vasanas are also in it. Interestingly, till the time we have a birth, God is also seated in our body, right? So all these are housed in our body. And now let's talk about what we are constantly doing when we are interacting in the world. Three transactions are taking place when we contact the world. We are receiving the stimuli from the world through our five organs of perception. So these are the Gyan Indriyas: hearing, feeling, seeing, tasting, and smelling. So this stimuli enters us through these Gyan Indriya, and that's why they're called Gyan Indriya, because they make us aware of things. The stimuli goes to our mind. Now, mind functions on likes and dislikes. It is pleasure oriented. So it'll continue doing a thing which it likes to do and not do something which it doesn't like to do. The mind then reports so to the intellect. Intellect does what? Is discriminative. It evaluates and actually determines the correct response. So the doctor has said that you can have at best half a mango. You're diabetic, you can have half a mango once a day or every 2 days. The mind wants to have the whole mango. Intellect is saying no. The doctor has said no, don't do it. So we have to see the interesting part is that the mind must function under the aegis of the intellect. And then, accordingly, a suitable response goes out into the world. So, through the five organs of action, the karmendriyas: speech, movement, grasp, evacuation, and reproduction. So, this is the entire traffic of life. So, in case of that mango example, if the intellect is overruling the mind or is guiding the mind, you will not have the any more mango. But if the mind is on its own trip and is not listening to the intellect, you will have finished the whole mango at once shot, right? So this is the transaction of life that we are continuously handling with any transaction. So even when I'm talking, you are hearing, it is entering you through your mind, through the intellect, you're forming a suitable response and putting it out, maybe in the form of question, which you might be noting down. So continuously we are doing this transaction. Stimuli from the world enter through the Gyanendriya, are processed by the mind and the intellect, and a suitable response is given back into the world through our organs of action. So now, when we are talking about the Paramatman, or when we are thinking about or trying to understand that supreme reality, it is through the subtle layer that we are trying to comprehend that reality. Therefore, the mind must be brought under the aegis of the intellect. And it is only then that the chattering mind and the fickle mind will become still and calm. All these chattering, fickle were terms that we had read in the Bhagavad Gita about the mind, right? And it is then that intellect will be available for contemplation. So, this is what we must remember as we proceed. Now, why do we act? Because of our vasanas, our inherent tendencies. So, I want to have the mango, I'll go and look for the mango in the refrigerator, otherwise, go and buy one, cut it, and eat it. So, vasana to that extent is the cause, and action is the effect, right? And the cycle or chronology of action is therefore vasana, my inherent seed personality, will create those kind of thoughts within me, which will produce those kind of desires and subsequent action. Now, this is where, while doing that action, which is a result of a vasana, my seed personality, this is what we have to take care of, is that that vasana of eating a mango, I'm just going ahead with the mango example, it can be anything, so should be sublimated with that slice of mango or the whole mango. However, if while eating the mango or performing the action, I give rise to more desires, maybe having another mango or maybe having another different kind of fruit, we are generating new vasanas. So, what is happening? Our baggage of vasanas, instead of getting sublimated, it increases. Now, that action, which was a result of the vasana, this has become the cause for generation of new vasanas, right? So the vasana has become the effect of the action. So this is one cycle actually. And of course, if the vasana is not fulfilled, it remains in our baggage. So till the time that vasana is there, we have to empty out our baggage to reach that Paramatman, because vasana is the impurity over that Paramatman, right? So while we contact the world out of ignorance, if we land up increasing our vasanas instead of sublimating or reducing them, vasanas will lead to new births. So vasanas propel us into the next birth. So the whole cycle runs like this. Past actions is what is my present personality, present nature. It is producing those kind of thoughts and desires, which is leading to those kind of actions. While performing those actions, if I'm not able to sublimate, then I'm adding on to future vasanas, right? So this cycle will go on and go forth, on and on. And action, which was the cause, now becomes the effect, right? So we have to understand this. At one point of time, vasana is the cause and action is the effect. If it is not handled judiciously, the action becomes a cause and vasana becomes a effect, right? So it's a continuous cycle, like the seed and tree. What came first, we don't know. Egg and chicken. It's the same situation, right? Now, this is what is the Vasana side, our nature and how we are propelled from birth after birth. What is death? So, see, the causal and the subtle bodies exist in the form of vasanas and unfulfilled desires. And the movement of the subtle and the causal bodies from one gross body to another is death. And of course, chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita has talked about this as a person casting away old clothes and donning on new ones. But why is a new body or new birth required? It is required to reduce our baggage of vasanas. Whatever vasanas are remaining, desires are remaining, those have to be sublimated. So we need a new body to experience that whatever desires are left. So that same mango example, you cannot have the mango vasana for that same remains. You will take the next birth just to eat a mango. And that's why I keep saying that whatever Kanjivaram saris you want to buy. Having a next birth to enjoy a Kanjivaram sari is really not worth it. So, to merge at the Supreme, we have to be clean of our vasanas, and that is what is meant by actions which do not taint us. Now, what is the role of God, Paramatman, in all of this? This we covered in detail in the Bhagavad Gita chapter, specifically chapters 7, 8, 9, and 10. Of course, Bhagavad Gita keeps talking about it again and again so that it settles somewhat with us. We God is the core of the creation. It enlivens the entire creation. It makes all beings move about or function in the world outside. But God remains a witness, a sakshi. So God enables us, yet does not act. And if you look, it'll make sense to us because the same God is enabling us, all of us, great thinkers, scientists, philanthropists, sages, also murderers and terrorists, and not only human beings, the entire creation, birds, plants, and animals, in fact, all life. So it functions like that typical example that we have been talking about: electricity in appliances, fuel in vehicles. So, fuel is necessary for the car or the vehicle to move, but the vehicle per se or the fuel per se has no desire to go anywhere. So, to that extent, God and the fuel are the same. So, the fuel is the prime mover. Similarly, God, like the fuel, is the prime mover, enables our body, mind, and intellect. But God has no desire. God is not interested in acting or not acting, just as the fuel has no desire to go anywhere. And God has no role in the way we function. So, how we drive the vehicle is entirely up to our discretion, right? We can be safe drivers, we can be driving on wrong side of the road, is entirely about our understanding. Fuel, you will not say that I filled up an accidented fuel or accidental fuel, therefore I met with an accident. No, the fuel is the same, but one vehicle reaches its destination, the other one does not. So similarly, God has no role in the way we function. So, and this we see, amongst the entire lot of people that we interact, some people are civilized, others are not. It's the same fuel, which it's same God which is enabling all of us. So the what is happening is when we see these kind of differences, the embodied one in the Jivatma, the Paramatman or that pure consciousness is conditioned. And the conditioning is nothing but the vasanas. So, therefore, we have that equation that God plus vasanas equals humans, right? So, till the time we are embodied, our vasanas will helplessly manifest themselves as actions, and action cannot be abandoned. Therefore, all our scriptures, the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, they continuously tell us that act, but act in a particular manner. That is what is being said continuously to us, right? And interestingly, it is only the human beings who have choice of action. The rest of the creation functions as if it were pre-programmed, you see. So, and they will not give up their nature. A cow will remain a herbivore even in the situation of a drought rather than become a carnivore. Similarly, a tiger will continue to be a carnivore and not start eating grass just because the tiger is not able to hunt. So they will function as they were programmed. But for us, we have a choice. And that brings me to the two paths that we have been discussing in and through the Bhagavad Gita sessions and also here, which the Kathopanishad talks about. The two paths for the humans are that which connects us to God, it is introverted, where we move inwards, and that which takes us to the world or extroverted. So the Kathopanishad says that two paths present themselves for humans at all times with every choice that we make in all activities. The Shreya path, which is the correct path, which is unpleasant in the beginning but blissful later. The Priya path, which is pleasant in the beginning but fraught with sorrow later on. And Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, verses 37 and 38 say the same thing, that that which is poison in the beginning but in the end like nectar, that happiness is sattvic, which is born out from the clarity of one's intellect. And the happiness, the verse number 38 goes on to say, happiness arising from the contact of sense organs with the object, which is nectarine in the beginning but turns to poison later on, is rajasic. With this is the priya path of the Kathopanishad. That same mango example, you can continue to eat, but at some time you will reach a stage where the doctor will say that no, you have to just stop. Kanjivaram sari, you can keep buying. At some point of time, you say, okay, my wardrobe has no space, right? So it turns sorrowful later on. Now, the other thing that is important is that Paramatman, the reality is subtle and beyond our limited equipment. So knowledge of the self is beyond a capacity, and that we understood with that pointers example. So that knowledge will reveal itself, or spiritual knowledge is revealed knowledge and not acquired knowledge. It can only manifest ourselves when our mind is calm and the intellect sharp. In ruffled waters or in dusty mirror, we cannot see our image. Therefore, our intellect should be sharp and discerning to keep us on the correct path. And it is only then that our vasana baggage will reduce. And again, I'll quote the Kathopanishad, section 1, subsection 2, verse number 6, which goes on to say that a childlike person, bala is the term that is used there, a childlike person is deluded by lust for worldly riches and does not move on the correct path. Deep thoughts of inner world do not arise. The person believes that the visible expanse is the only world that exists, and because of this, he comes into my clutches again and again. And this is Yamaraj, Lord Yamaraj talking. So Kathopanishad is a dialogue between the child Nachiketa and Lord Yam. So Lord Yam says, Yamaraj is saying that it is because of this reason that he comes into my clutches again and again. That means is born and dies and is born again. So the verse therefore implies that through avidya, I sublimate my vasanas and desires and try to get beyond mrityu or transcend mrityu. So actions, as this Upanishad, Ish Upanishads talks about in verse number 1 and 2. And through knowledge, through Vidya, I start peeling off the layers of my personality as indicated in verses 6 and 7 of the Upanishad to transform my personality and see oneness. Now, to transform my personality, my mind and intellect needs to be subtle and pure. And of course, we talked about the yogic practices at the level of the body, mind, and intellect. So, after that purification, we gradually reach a stage when the truth starts revealing itself. And we understand that the bliss is a guna. The bliss that we are deriving is a result of the Supreme Paramatman and not of the Mercedes Benz or the designer clothes or the mango. And at that point of time, we should be ready to take that leap of faith and become one with that God. So that is the Amrit we are talking about. And here I would like to take the example of that pole vault, right? So pole vaulting is a sport where there is a bar which is several meters our height, and if you were to see that bar and your height, you will always say, how can I possibly cross over? The pole vaulter, what the pole vaulter does, takes this supple pole, runs towards it, and at the right spot, sticks the pole into the ground and takes the support of that pole to leap over. The interesting points to note are that without the pole vaulter cannot cross that bar several meters, his or her height. Keeping the pole will also not help the person cross over the bar. At the right spot, the pole is used to get the lift and be left on this side of the bar. And then we go on to the other crossover. So the three type of practices, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, scriptures, gurus, they have to be used at the right time to take that leap, and they will all remain here. We can't say that, oh no, I have to take my copy of Bhagavad Gita to Paramatma. No, it has to be left here. What will I do with that copy of Bhagavad Gita? I am one with God, right? These are only aids. And so this is that union or that attainment of God that we are talking about. This is the Amrit that this verse is talking about. And with that, let me just close the session. So I'll stop the recording. Oh, I don't know what happens to the recording. And can you just give me a moment? I'll just join you guys back. Is that okay with you?
Sure, Deepa. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, just give me a
Yes.
moment. Sorry. Uh, and before I end, I don't know where the recording stopped anyway. So I also want to provide how knowledge is to be converted to that small bit of knowledge that we get from the teacher or the scripture or the guru. I would like to draw a parallel with the process of curd making. See, when we make curd, what happens? We take a small part of that curd and add it to lukewarm milk. It is thoroughly mixed. And then we leave it to set overnight, maybe, right? And what happens is that the running milk, thin running milk, then sets. So, similarly, if our fickle, unstable running mind, which keeps running after the sense objects, a little bit of knowledge or truth is induced, and we spend some time thinking or reflecting upon it and meditating, the mind becomes stable. And in that union, so that is when we're actually trying to attain that Paramatman, we will experience that Amrit. So, with that, I would like to end. So, any